All right, guys, today we want to start to talk about the different government and economic systems that we're going to cover in class over the next semester or so, with the different types of government and economic systems that will pop up. We're going to go into a lot more detail about these things later as we work our way through imperialism in Africa and Asia. But I wanted to give you guys a quick overview to kind of get you guys thinking about that. Plus, it'll also help you guys with your upcoming quiz that we're going to have in our class here soon. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. We're going to start first off talking about the different types of governments that we're going to look at over the next few weeks and months. So the first one we've already kind of talked about and discussed with is a dictatorship. And in a dictatorship, common people have little or no say in the government. One person makes all the decisions for the country. If there are any type of elections to kind of make things look good in terms of the international community, they are typically rigged, and when the leader is usually returned back to power that is in power for that particular country. They are ruled by force, and usually the leaders have the backing of the military in order to kind of help to keep their rule in place. Some of the examples that we have looked at and will talk about is North Korea, Russia, and Syria. Those are all examples of dictatorships. The next one is what we call an oligarchy. An oligarchy is a government that is ruled by a small group of wealthy elite people. We are really going to get into this when we talk about South Africa during apartheid, in which the whites, who were the smaller group, were the wealthy group, ruled all of the country of South Africa. And like I said, we're going to get into a lot more detail about this later. But the one thing you have to know is that a oligarchy is a group, or a country that is run by a small group of wealthy elite people. The next type we have, you guys talked about last year in the 6th grade, were monarchies. There are two types, the first of which is an absolute monarchy, which may sound very similar to a dictatorship, and it is where a king or queen has all the power, and they're the ones that rule in the interest of the country. Usually in a monarchy, not only in the absolute but also the constitutional, but power is passed from one generation to the next. And an example of an absolute monarchy is Saudi Arabia. So with that said, the next one is a constitutional monarchy, in which the king or queen is seen as a figurehead, kind of a symbol of the country, with no real power. All of their power is really just ceremonial and kind of works from that standpoint. One of the examples from that is Great Britain. So like I said, monarchies too also pass from one generation to the next, so there's no real voting on who becomes the next king, queen, emperor, however that works. So just one of those things to kind of think about as we talk about different things in the future with these types of governments. The next one are democracies. There are two types, first of which is the parliamentary democracy. And it looks a little bit different than the democracy we have here in the U.S. Okay, we have an executive branch that's usually made up of what they call a prime minister, and a legislative branch that is made up of the parliament. Basically, in a parliamentary democracy, people still vote on their officials, but they only vote on the parliament. They elect the parliament, the legislative branch of their particular government. Then their legislative branch elects their prime minister, president, premier, however they term as their main leader of their country. And so usually the power, or the party that is in power in the parliament, will then pick one of their own to become the leader of their country. One of the examples is Great Britain. The other type of democracy is a representative democracy. And in a representative democracy, people directly vote for all members of the government. There's no stopgap in there in between which they have to vote for legislative, and the legislative then picks their executive branch. People vote directly for all members of their government. Representatives are to act in the interest of the people or risk losing their next election because they're not doing the job of the people. One of the examples of that is the U.S. The next one we've already talked about in the past, and that is a theocracy. And a theocracy, which we talked about with ancient Egypt, is a government that is ruled by a political and religious leader. So they, in many cases, are the leader of the church as well as the state. An example we kind of see of that in this day and age is the country of Iran. Next thing we're going to kind of run into is we're going to talk about the types of economy we're going to look at this year. The first of which is a market economy. And an economy is based on private ownership, free trade, and competition. And if you have the physical and financial means to do so, you can create and run your own business. It is run, and basically businesses are successful or not successful based on the supply and demand that they supply for these particular people. People want the products that come from those particular businesses. So it's very much a situation in which people can do and work on what they choose as being their company to create a situation in which everybody can take part in the economy. One of the examples of that is the U.S., even though we do have some examples of a mixed economy, which we'll get into here in just a little bit as well too, but we are primarily a market economy. The next one is a command economy, in which the central government makes all the decisions for the country when it comes to the economy. Most of this falls underneath the idea of what we call communism, in which the government is supposed to be running the economy in order to help suit the needs of all of the country, to benefit everybody in the country, not just a few people within the country. The problem is that it doesn't technically usually work out that way, and what occurs is that we start to see dictators come to power and establish these command economies, or the command economy is established and the dictator comes to power, and it kind of turns things in a situation in which these groups start to lose power, and you start to have some major issues that occur as a result of that: malnutrition, lack of jobs, lack of people wanting to work, and everything else like that. There's a whole slew of problems, and we're going to kind of talk about that when we get into communism. We talk about China. An example of that, which we've recently talked about, is North Korea. And the last one we're going to talk about is a mixed economy. It is a mix of both command and market economy, in which they kind of do some things that benefit the government as a whole. I said that the U.S. is kind of a mixed economy because a lot of what we do here, we have a lot of market economy, but there are also a few things that we have a command economy for, and one of which is kind of like your utilities. And the reason behind that is because then the government can set the prices for those particular utilities for one group to come in and take control of those utilities for a particular area. And as a result, it makes it easier on the people that live that area, so they know who to contact for the utilities, as well as if there's a problem, they know who to contact, rather than having groups competing over those particular things, which would cause more headaches than helpful in terms of prices and everything else like that. There is one last type of economy that I do want to kind of cover that I did not put a slide up for, and that is a traditional economy. And that is a type of economy in which people basically trade goods in order to create the economy as a whole. We've talked about trading in the past with our ancient civilizations, and that's where a traditional economy gets its basis. And if you wanted to trade something for another thing, you'd have to work it out in terms of a barter situation between the two sides in order for that to work. So with that said, that covers everything that we're going to talk about as it relates to government and economic systems. Like I said, we are going to come back and talk about a lot of this stuff as we work our way through our case studies with imperialism. It's just going to take us a little while to get there, and I wanted to give you guys a real brief overview of those things. So this will help you guys study for your quiz that's coming up soon, and if you guys have any questions, make sure you guys let me know.